Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Furman, and I am the founder and core organizer for Mutual Aid Peoria. This is the second part of our Mutual Aid timeline, history, and impacts webinar. So if you haven't seen the first part already, I would recommend going back and seeing part one first, because that gives you an overview of how the presentation is structured and what some of the symbols in our timeline represent. But assuming that you have seen the first part, which covers phase one of the organization, let's move into phase two. So the next few months were really all about rebuilding and figuring out a smarter and more efficient way forward. We discussed on the banking committee and agreed that we needed to stop bringing in new people. So you can see this early on, we just were on hold here with, I think, at 163 people in our database. And since our only fundraising person and the person who had been doing half of the packing and delivery had left, we needed a way to really figure out what we had the capacity to do, and we needed to find a way to prioritize people. We also knew that our system of calling people each week to find out their needs was not the most equitable. People who worked multiple jobs, people who were disabled, or for whatever reason might miss the call, would miss their opportunity to get help that week. And so we came up with this idea that what we needed to do was develop a survey and dedicate as much time as it took to get all of the information we needed about each household to know exactly what they needed. And then we would let them know, well, we can guarantee that we can give you this every 2 weeks going forward. And we also settled on a more clear definition of what the possible components of a care package would be. So we always included a household cleaning package within the broader care package, and that would be a handful of those trifold paper towels, a baggie with about 7 laundry pods in it, half-size dish soap and sponge, and then maybe if other items came in, I think one time we got a bunch of Windex donated, we would give that out. And then for hygiene, we always gave 1 toilet paper, and then some kind of extra. 1 week it might be soap, it might be razors the next week, toothpaste and toothbrushes. We just tried to switch it up just each week with something different. And that was really left up to the discretion of me, the shopper. So I just tried to decide something different each time. The menstrual hygiene package was really dependent on the needs of the household. And so they would get, depending on what they asked for, it would be 14 tampons, 14 pads, and or 14 panty liners. If they needed all 3, they got 14 of each. If they just needed 1, they got 14 of that one. We gave condoms as, if requested. The food packages did continue to vary pretty dramatically just because we at this point weren't buying food. Our partnerships with supporting existing food pantries across the South End led us to get a pretty good supply of overflow items from those food pantries. But we tried to give them some kind of grain, whether that was pasta or rice, some condiment of some type, ketchup, syrup, peanut butter, whatever came in. Usually some kind of chips or other, type of snack food, a canned good of some kind, ideally something vegetable and something fruit, and then 3 waters. And then we also had kids snacks bags, which would be, maybe chips in that as well, or like cookies or fruit snacks or, those more like snacky items we would give out. And then the diapers bags, they'd get like a half sleeve, so about 30 diapers, and then a package of baby wipes. And then for a while we were doing Enfamil, but we had to stop. It's really expensive. So we stopped giving that out. And so, they would have these components, and then based on the number of people in the household, if there was 5 adults, they'd get, 5 foods. If there was 3 people who menstruated, then they'd get 3 menstruation packages. If they didn't have babies, they didn't get the baby packages. If they had 4 kids, we'd give 4 kids packs, and so on. And we also had to rebuild the packing space. We needed shelves, tables, clothing racks. And so I took the lead on this, and I used Facebook Marketplace to find shelves. That was probably my main source, and it was interesting. Once we would explain what who we were and what we were going to use the shelf for, people would be really supportive and give us other things. One place I was getting shelves from wound up being a family who was helping their neighbor, who the neighbor's family. Their neighbor had passed, and they were helping those kids get all the stuff out of the house and sell it. And it just was so difficult and moving so slow. And eventually, they said they just would give us. I mean, they gave us lamps, tons of wall art, tons of like kitchen items. And so it was really helpful. And honestly, it helped them because the stress of trying to get rid of the stuff and sell it was a lot. And so I think that was almost like another service that we provided. And then another place that we got a lot of really great shelves was from a mall that had closed in Galesburg. And they just had all sorts of, the clothing racks from the, retail stores and shelves from a restaurant that had been in there. And I included that just because I thought it was especially poetic to be, harvesting equipment from this dead mall, this, mecca of capitalism, and bringing it back to our, anti-capitalist free for the people store. So, in the ruins of capitalism, we will find what we need to keep each other safe. June 5th through 8th, we did our first mutual aid road trip and provided mutual aid to support the Treaty People Gathering, which was a two-spirit-led convening of thousands of people to defend the Anishinaabe land against the expansion of the Line 3 tar sands oil pipeline, which violated native treaties, threatened the Mississippi River, and would also continue to fuel climate change. And this was an independent project. Well, there was a banking committee member with me. We didn't, use, group, donated funds to do this. It was, funded by me. But we did use some funds just to buy additional like menstrual supplies, hygiene, snacks, and sunscreen that we could provide as mutual aid to the protesters as a support for that group. And, the goal of this was really to try to restart this idea of connecting the work we were doing to the broader movement work. At the beginning, when we were having team meetings, we were inviting people in from other cities who were doing mutual aid work, connecting with people from Chicago who were doing mutual aid work. So we did have this sort of, more broad connection. And when we stopped having as many public meetings, that kind of went downhill. And so, this and future road trips were meant to try to just help remind us that we were part of a broader movement. June 11th, 2021, Illinois reached stage 5 of the Restore Illinois plan and fully reopened. And this was a really pivotal point. It marked the end of us really being a COVID-19 pandemic relief organization and started kind of a fundamental shift to where we were focusing more on, how can we bring people together across divides, across racial divides, gender divides, class divides, to work together and start to build relationships that can hopefully make us a more resilient community for when the next catastrophe hits. And at this point, Illinois had seen 1,387,739 COVID-19 cases and 23,264 deaths. June 11th, 2021, Illinois reached the final stage of the Restore Illinois plan and fully reopened. At this point, we had 1.3 million cases of COVID-19 and 23,000 deaths. And one reason that this is a significant milestone is with Illinois, reopening, it started to mark this sort of fundamental shift in who we were. We started as a COVID-19 pandemic response group, and we were shifting into something that was more focused on mutual aid as a way to bring people together across divides, across racial, gender, and class divides to begin to work together and build a more resilient system so that we could be prepared for the next pandemic. June 12th, we supported the LGBTQ picnic in Peoria, providing water, healthy snacks, and sunscreen. And shortly after that, we finished that survey project that we had started to get to better understand people's needs. We wound up with, out of the 160 families that we were helping intermittently, we wound up with 40 who would complete the survey and still needed help. They were all people who were very deeply in need, and they, for the most part, were the people who had been asking for help weekly, whereas a lot of those other people would ask for help, once a month, once every 2 weeks. And it was these 40 that continued with us for the rest of the program. So you can see here, this is where the orange line representing the number of people that we had in our system who needed calls had been flat because we were holding everything while we completed the survey. And once we finish the survey, it just kind of disappears here because that represents that really with, once we knew what every family needed, there wasn't really a need to call them every 2 weeks. And so, and there was not a lot of volunteer support to keep that calling team going. And so we really just ended that project. The families now knew, when to expect a delivery, what they would expect to get in that delivery, and we knew what we needed to get for them in advance. It was already set. They could always reach out to us and make an update if they needed to, but that marks, the end of the calling team and the beginning of a more regular and systematic delivery system. And you can see here, this is a breakdown house by house of the value of what they received. So, baby care is in blue. Most of the people that we helped needed diapers. There's a few who just have this little blue. I think those are the people that just needed wipes but didn't ask for diapers. And families that didn't have any babies, wouldn't get any diapers. Menstrual hygiene is this pink. Most of the families had somebody who needed menstrual hygiene supplies in them, but we had many who didn't. Most people asked for food. I think there was at least one house that didn't ask for food at any point. And everybody always wanted hygiene and household cleaning supplies. I think except for this person here at the end who just wanted food and menstrual hygiene supplies. So yeah, people didn't, things range from people who are getting the equivalent of $10 in value every 2 weeks to people who are getting the equivalent of $70 in value every 2 weeks. And it was based, not on what they provided to the group, but people, each received based on their own needs. And one other important thing I want to highlight just in regards to the breakdown of who got what and this survey was that the original idea that I proposed was for us to include in the survey a series of questions that would help us start to understand how the interlocking systems of oppression were impacting our people, and for us to base the amount and type of help that they got on what oppressions they faced. I think originally thinking just that people that had more systems of oppression acting against them, the more help they would get. I think, as we talked about that, maybe a better way to approach that would have been, depending on what systems of oppression were acting on them, we gave them help that was tailored to those systems, not necessarily, more is better, but just that we, if we understood that a person was disabled, providing help that was, customized to support their abilities. But as we discussed it, we found the calling team definitely did not feel comfortable asking some of the questions, questions like, how has your sexual orientation impacted your ability to get help when you need it? Or, asking about, their gender identity or things like that, getting involved into conversations about have they experienced racism and is that impacting their ability to get their needs met? And so, I was frustrated and thought that we should be able to ask those questions, but we decided to bring in a few of the folks who we had volunteered with us, people that came as recipients and were volunteers, and we talked to them, and they immediately said, "Oh no, you can't go around asking people those questions. They're going to think that you're the government, and they're not going to trust you." So I think that kind of put the kibosh on that idea. So I think that was really that for that idea. But the intention to help the most marginalized people was still there, but we just change the survey to just be a straight logistics survey, just asking about number of people helped, what products are needed, and not to dive into the way those systems of repression impacted people. July 15th, we supported that, or we took part in a community art and commerce event that was led by a local activist. And this was, one of the first events that was really led and had a lot of strong engagement with folks that, started off as aid recipients who then became members of the banking committee. And this was also a really great event to help us continue to have an outlet to get some of those like bigger items like the clothes and the household items out. So this was a really successful event. We helped the Helping Hands event, which was led by Street Family, which is another local nonprofit who specifically focuses on helping the unhoused people. We got, by this point, we had been working with unhoused people for a while, and we had somebody who had experience being unhoused on our banking committee, so we really had a much better sense what to get people. Of course, the menstrual supplies are always needed by everybody. Those should be free. They're outrageously expensive. People need them to engage in society, so they should be free, according to me. Um, we also gave, I think when people ask, what are things that unhoused people need, if you think about what would you need if you were camping, and most of those things are needed by unhoused people. So, we gave out like bug spray wipes, individual packets of wipes that had bug spray on them. I had not thought before about how big of a deal bug bites are for people who sleep outside. Sunscreen is really valuable. Anything related to foot care, any type of underwear or sock is really needed. We gave little individual mouthwash bottles. You can't always brush your teeth, but being able to swig some mouthwash can be really helpful. Deodorant, items like that are all really helpful for people. And so we distributed those at this event. We helped the Taft Homes First Amendment rights. The Taft Homes was part one, and then Harrison Homes was part two. And these were really led by residents of some of the very, very underserved public housing projects in Peoria. Some of them were undergoing renovation, but even before and during that process, tenants' rights were not being respected. There is a long history of abuse, which you can Google if you look up Peoria, Peoria Public Housing, or if you go to our website, we have some articles about some of the conditions. But we put these supplies together to help folks survive the Peoria public housing system, to help control with the bug infestations, the mold, etc. And just to like elevate the voices of what people were going through. So this was an important juncture. This was when I first communicated the idea of an organizational structure to people. We had a banking committee which could make decisions on how money was spent. We had discussed that, before having a banking committee that could say yes or no on a purchase, we needed like a executive committee or an oversight committee that could have like oversight over the entire organization. And I understood that, and I think we were working towards something like that. But we also, I should say, I really didn't want to have a hierarchical org chart where there was one person or one group at the top, and then below them people that reported to them. And so the idea, the sort of the vision I was trying to communicate to people was the top image, where we were acting more like a living organism, where there were different committees that acted more or less like organs, kind of independently doing their thing to keep the greater body of the organization going. And so the spherical shape that you see and this big vacuum that's sucking in resources, that represented a social media team that would give us our appearance to the outside world, and was also in charge of siphoning in donations and money and resources that we could use. And there's also this antenna at the top, which is most to represent possible like education that we might be putting out into the world. Could eventually maybe grow into its own committee, but originally was conceived as part of a social media team. And then, this So with this hole here, you can sort of peek inside the organism and see how it worked on the inside. And the idea was that the money and the resources would get siphoned in and go to this box with a dollar sign on it, which represented the banking committee. The resources would go to that committee that was led by people of color and led by the people who were most in need, and they would decide how that money would be allocated. And then it would go to, this factory kind of represented the current incarnation of how that money was spent, which was, buying food, hygiene, household cleaning supplies, and or the hotels, but, mainly the food, hygiene, household cleaning supplies and, doing the work of packaging them up and delivering them. And then there was also the idea of this network that you can see behind these connections, these nodes. The idea was to repurpose the old calling team to, not be required to make a certain number of calls each week, but to have the ability to log into the system and do calls if they wanted to, just to reach out to people and talk to them and see how their life had changed, if COVID was still a factor, if other systems of oppression were a factor. And they would be the sort of informational network or this, this underground fungal network, making connections, getting ideas, getting thoughts, and spreading them to other teams so that, the maybe they would find out that, some crisis was happening that could then be communicated to the banking team, and that could help the banking team be more informed as to how they make decisions about how money could be allocated. And so the idea was, we could operate, with each of these committees just sort of operating independently and doing what they thought was best without any sort of central command structure. And that would keep us in a truly flat organizational state. There would probably be a need for, a person from each of the committees to come together as part of a communications team just to make sure that information was flowing. But the purpose wouldn't be that that group of people was above everybody else, but more so that they were passing on the needs and the ideas that were coming from each of the respective teams. And, hopefully that we would continue this way, sort of floating around as this entity that you see on the screen, navigating a capitalist system by, sucking in donation money that would come from, value aligned people of privilege and bringing that in to help more marginalized people who are within the group. I mean, we were sort of shifting from this public service that was helping marginalized people during a crisis to sort of an intentional community of people who were marginalized working outside of the system. And this was also the time that we launched our new social media pages and came up with our new name. Remember at the end of phase one, a member left the group and sort of claimed the old Peoria Mutual Aid Network Facebook page, which had, over 1,000 followers for themselves. We couldn't, start a new Facebook page with that name. So we had to come up with a new name so we could have a new social media page out there to reach out to people. And so one of our members suggested the name Mutual Aid Peoria with the initials of MAP. And the idea being that we help people navigate this complicated system as a map. And so we launched our new Facebook page. At this point, with the state reopen, mutual aid was not the trending buzzword that it was, and it was really hard to ever, we never got anywhere near the number of followers on that first page. And, unfortunately also, we never really, the goal was to get the banking committee off the ground and sort of operating independently and then move to other and set up these other structures, the social media team, the calling network, the packaging group. But we couldn't get to the point where the banking committee was fully operational, and there was also additional people looking to volunteer for these other roles. And so we only ever really got the banking committee formed. But this was the aspirational structure that we were going for at this time. Also in the month of September, Peoria County would reach 50% fully vaccinated, meaning 50% of the people having both of the required shots to be considered fully vaccinated against COVID. And at this point, Illinois had seen 1,603,608 COVID-19 cases and 23,933 deaths. September 22nd, 2021, Peoria reached 50% vaccinated. That's 50% of the people being fully vaccinated. And we had 1.6 million cases at this point in the state and 25,000 deaths. November 1st, we did another partnership with a local nonprofit, the Urban League, provided a luncheon for our members, and we had about 10 people who showed up and got a lot of really great information that helped connect them to programs that the Urban League has, including free childcare and additional wraparound services to help people. November 19th, the NAACP women's group led a fundraiser. It wasn't really a fundraiser, it was like a goods donation drive. And so all of those boxes are filled with just, like nice soaps and lotions and just like lots and lots of, like decks of cards, like a lot of things that just like really helped take our care packages that we gave to people like up a notch. So they weren't just the same old, pantry goods. They helped get people something that was really special. So we really appreciated that. November 21st, we did another mutual aid road trip to the Reimagine Kenosha protest, led by Justin Blake. On November 19th, Kyle Rittenhouse was found not guilty of murder in killing the protesters in Kenosha. And so we felt it was especially important for us to go up and show that not everyone coming up to Kenosha from Illinois was bringing AR-15s. Some of us were bringing mutual aid and support. And so this was another self-funded trip, but we did use some mutual aid funds to buy the water that you see here, which was given in support of the protest. December of 2021, Christmas Joints. This was definitely our most fun program. We had a member who had access to a pretty large amount of inexpensive weed that they were willing to donate to us, and so we rolled it up into joints and we let folks know when the Christmas delivery was coming, and if they were interested in a free joint from Mutual Aid Peoria, we would give it to them. And it wasn't without its controversy. We had a member and a Patreon supporter who left the group because of that. That person was a addiction counselor and didn't agree with that. But most of the volunteers thought it was a good idea. The vast majority of the recipients were very happy about it. We had a few folks who did say, I'm in active recovery. I've been sober for, a year or what have you. Don't offer me drugs, please. And, we noted that. We marked it down in the same place that we mark allergies, and we moved on. We did also learn that our members who were in public housing, which is federally funded, were unable to have weed in their house. And so, that was a lesson learned, and a lesson to learn that even though weed was legal in Illinois and had been since 2020, there were still people, largely Black and brown, low-income people, who could be penalized for having it. And, it's important to note too that this, wasn't all about, just the fun of it. I mean, we did enjoy weed, and our people definitely enjoyed weed, and it was something that we could do together and get to know each other, and it brought us together during meetings sometimes. There's something about that plant that brings people together, and bringing people together across divides is what we were trying to do. But we also, along with the joint, we wrapped it up in a zine called "You Have Skills," and it was all about different things that people can do to bring to a movement. So if you have skills, if you're a parent and you're good at taking care of kids, you can babysit kids during a meeting so that people can have a meeting and they can bring their kids and there's something for the kids to do. It was meant for people to, enjoy the joint and then also look through that and start thinking about ways that they could get more deeply involved with the group and things that they could do to contribute. And, as we got into January and February, we found the need to use the Green Fund again. This time we were more strategic. We helped a lot more people. one thing that we learned last year, the year before when we had done this, was once we got the people into the hotel, they looked at us and they said, "Great, thank you so much. When's dinner?" And it hit us that these were people who relied on services that they were now put into hotels around the city, nowhere near the services that they used to get food. They had no money, they had no car, and so we were pretty quickly able to pull together an ad hoc team of people who could bring food out, even if it was just going and buying a whole bunch of Avantis or something like that and bringing it to people, a bunch of McDonald's, whatever. But this year we really strategized about it. And here, as you can see, Tanya, cooking food that we later packaged up and sent to people. And it was a really great way for people, again, to kind of come together over food. We are here in the Mutual Aid kitchen with Tanya Venable. Tanya, what were you just saying?
I said I'm black and I'm proud.
Yes, ma'am.
Say it loud.
That's right.
Glad to be an American.
Woohoo! And we got cantaloupe slices,
Beef stew.
Tanya's homemade beef stew, which is incredible.
Cookies. Little snack cookies. Sandwiches.
Sandwich
Crackers.
station is pretty much done. We got them here all wrapped up and in aluminum foil.
And those right there are the meals.
And we are bringing these out to our unhoused friends who are put up in hotels during severe weather here. With the climate changing, we know that we are going to have more and more severe weather, and it's unhoused people who bear the brunt of those impacts. And so we are doing what we can to keep people housed and fed.
Yes, and we are proud to do it.
Yes.
Anyone who'd like to help, let us know.
Yes, definitely.
I know it's a little late in the evening, but we just got a late start.
It's, made with love. It takes time.
Made with love, exactly.
All right, we will send you more updates as the night progresses. So that really ends the second phase. You can see a major change in our deliveries, looking at the delivery timeline here at the top, with us becoming much more systematic and predictable with our schedule. And looking at the incoming donations graph here, you can see really around, getting into, late April, mid-June, a month or so, maybe after the big public conflict, our individual donations really dried up. That's this lime green color here. We did have one member who led a very successful fundraiser in partnership with the Bradley University speech team, who raised funds for us when they held their speech tournament on their Peoria campus here. And then shortly after that is when I launched our Patreon, which is represented by the gray area. The idea behind the Patreon was to get enough subscribers to get a monthly donation to cover our deliveries. And then using the information that we had in the survey, we'd be able to estimate the cost of what adding another family might be. And hopefully we could get to the point where we could be, trying to bring on more followers so that we could add more families. Looking here at the phase 2 outgoing purchases, you might be able to see that we had much more going on in the outgoing direction than the incoming direction. And you can also see that I was still funding a significant portion of the work, with the orange color representing my direct funds and the black color representing donated money. That winter of 2021 going into 2022 in particular was pretty hard, and I was spending a lot of money on rapid response for people, and starting to see that as we had less and less active members and we didn't have much of an audience to promote asks to, more and more financial burden was falling on me. And then also on the recipient side, people were less and less comfortable making asks to other people, like in the discussion group. So people sort of just started directing their asks directly to me when they were in a crisis. And so it was definitely a sign of dysfunction in the group, and I will talk more about that in the reflections webinar. So going in a little bit more detail here, you can see in phase 2 there was $124.64 spent by other volunteers on the food hygiene household cleaning supply distribution program, and this was another purchase from that same member who I had helped shopped that had done a purchase in that I talked about in phase one. Looking at my personal funds, I spent $1,444.86 on food, hygiene, and household cleaning supplies, filling in gaps when funds were low. I spent $1,810.91 on hotels. And that is because, I mean, yes, we had set aside $4,000 in the green fund, but we did not have enough money in that fund to house really to meet the needs, to house everyone that had come to us through our connections with the local harm reduction clinic during the worst, most severe storms, as well as our people, in an ongoing way as the winter continued to wear on. And we got into pretty heated discussions in the banking committee about whether, we should be prioritizing, our members who had come to us and volunteered, but who also didn't show much, evidence of moving out of homelessness versus helping people who came to us through the local harm reduction clinic who, were taking advantage of services and programs and seemingly, trying to move forward more so. So we could never really, come to an agreement as to who to prioritize, and we couldn't come to a complete agreement on what constituted severe enough weather to warrant a hotel. If it was, any night that it was in single digits, or, maybe it could be in the teens if it was wet or snowing, or depending on the wind. I mean, there just was a lot of factors. So there was a lot of gray area. And rather than bring that to the committee, I just decided to spring for a lot of the hotels for myself when it was for somebody who had volunteered with us. And I spent $2,559.72 on rapid response, which is about 2.5 times as much as the previous year. I spent $1,430.68 on fast food dinners, $708.41 on smokes and beers and sodas and gas station food for people. And I gave $371.75 directly to people. I spent $732.53 on events. This includes the majority of the Airbnb for when we made that trip to the Treaty People Gathering, as well as gas. And I spent $61.64 on supplies for the Taft and Harrison First Amendment rights protests, just because we needed them urgently, and we didn't have enough to set up the table that we wanted to set up. I spent $968.46 on transportation, which includes U-Haul trucks and my estimated gas doing deliveries, and $443.14 on ops, operational items, which included paying GoDaddy for the hosting for the website, the Costco annual membership fee, and continuing to pay the monthly fee to keep the Patreon going. And looking now from the pool of donated money, we spent $39.56.13 on the food distro and $38.02.36 on hotels for unhoused people. This $4.39, I remember specifically, is a small pouch of rolling tobacco that I got for a unhoused friend who had volunteered that day, and I didn't have my personal debit card with me, so I just swiped the group card. So yes, some donation money did go to that. And we spent $420 on events. That includes $130.73 on food and cooking supplies for when we did the community art and small business expo at Cement Park. And one of our members, Ice, wanted to cook and sell his bomb ass wings at the event, and it was absolutely worth it to do that. We spent $290.04 on supplies for the Street Family Helping Hands event. So those were items that were given away to unhoused people. We spent $442.05 on either U-Haul trucks or estimated gas for volunteers, and $675.64 on operational items, which was mainly shelves new shelves that I bought to rebuild the packing area. We spent $507.31 on that. Uh, and oh, and that also included some garbage and recycling bins, which we got from Menards. So looking now specifically at just the donated money, we got $4,158.97 donated in, which included individual donations, the one additional donation from a COVID stimulus, which we got, which did not show up on the graph earlier. And I'll try to edit that if I can. And 18% of that came from the donations from the Bradley speech team. And so we still had $6,760.23 in our bank account from money that was left over at the end of phase one. With the additional 4,000 in, we spent $9,425.98. The majority of that went to the food hygiene distribution. A lot of it went to hotels, and then events, transport operations from there. And we had 26 volunteers in phase two. Many of those were original volunteers from phase one. 19 of them were, but we had 7 new volunteers who joined us in phase two. We made 520 deliveries. We paid for 69 instances of a person in a hotel, which is many more than the previous phase. We held 20 meetings, and we supported or led 9 events. Phase 3, the final phase. So here you can see the timeline for phase 3. You can see that we did 3 deliveries over the course of the year after pushing the Patreon for several months. We could see what our rate of money coming in was and what we could afford to do, and pending any changes, we saw pretty early on that we were going to be able to do 3 deliveries for the year, and so we notified the families of that, and hoped to try to find ways to bring more money in. You can also see there's a lot of meetings with X's through it, and so those are banking committee meetings where folks just no call, no showed to the point that we didn't have enough people to have a meeting. So you can see that enthusiasm for the work was definitely dwindling. But we did have some important events and some key milestones over the course of this year. On June 24th, the Supreme Court did overturn Roe v. Wade, but prior to that, the likely decision was leaked, and so groups rallied around the idea to defend reproductive rights. Some of our members were very passionate on this issue, and so we were there tabling at an event that was led by Socialist Alternative, Democratic Socialists of America, and Communist Party USA, the Peoria chapter. Now, one thing that I did not realize at the time or expect was that we were just coming out of the most significant spike in COVID-19 cases that Illinois had seen since the pandemic began. Earlier, the last update we gave, the case count was around here, and it was a million, less than 1.5 million cases, and by May 15th, there would have been 3,229,963 cases. But also notable was that the number of deaths did not spike as dramatically as the number of cases did. Around when we gave the last update, there had been 20-some thousand deaths, and at this point, there were only 33,834 deaths. Wellfest was May 21st. This was just a general health and wellness fest that we tabled at and collected donations. Summer Camp, May 27th to May 29th. This is a music festival that happens in Chillicothe, just north of Peoria. We got connected to this event by engaging with the Indigenous-led permaculture exhibit, which is there on site. We had a new member who was very enthusiastic about permacultures, about, well, community gardens overall, but especially permaculture. And knowing that there was indigenous led permaculture project nearby, we got engaged with them. And through that relationship, we were able to secure a spot in the nonprofit row at summer camp. And this is a pretty large event. It's in the tens of thousands of people who attend. There are plenty of people who fly in and then buy their camping gear and then just leave it behind when they leave. And so we were able to partner with summer camp and set up a tent and let people know that any camping gear that they didn't want to bring back home, tents, sleeping bags, hammocks, sleeping pads, they could leave that with us and we would donate it to unhoused people in the area. And we got, I think it was 10 tents, 4 sleeping bags, and just a lot of like sunscreen and some pantry stable food. And so this was a really great event. We were at Juneteenth in Peoria on June 19th. This was the second year nationally that Juneteenth was a federal holiday, and we showed up with several of our members to just to network and get to know people in the area and talk to people about what was happening in the Black community in Peoria at the time. June 29th, 2022, we attended the Dual Power Gathering. This was another mutual aid road trip, one that I self-funded, but it was a chance for us to go to a convening of other mutual aid practitioners from throughout the Midwest. It was a really powerful event. There was a number of great workshops, decolonizing the resistance, fighting fascism, and just a lot of great folks who were doing this work that we were able to connect with and share ideas with. And we definitely hope that this will continue and be something that we can go back to. And so it was, after this event, we convened, we talked about the state of the organization, the levels of volunteer engagement, the amount of money that was coming in. And we realized that for us to really continue as a mutual aid organization, we needed to be filled with people who are of the community, helping do the work and leading the work. And so we wrote a letter to the families and we explained that we started during the COVID-19 crisis. We were happy to help anyone and everyone who came to us who needed help, but we fell into a charity model where, a few more privileged folks were doing most of the work and making most of the decisions. Yes, we did have the banking committee, but there was a lot of other decisions happening that weren't just how the money was spent. And that in order for us to continue at this point, 3 years out from the initial lockdowns, we needed the families to get involved in some way. And that could be as simple as joining a monthly call and sharing, an idea with us, up to, helping with, watching kids during a meeting, or helping to make food for a meeting, or helping to make signs for a rally, all the way up to being on the banking committee. And so we drafted that letter and we sent that out in our July deliveries. Shortly after that, we were finally able to get the folks banking committee back together. We made some hard choices about, who should remain on the committee moving forward, hoping that we would move forward with folks who were really deeply committed. We wound up with only 3 folks left on the committee. And you can see the next 2 meetings after that, we still had so many no-shows that we weren't able to have a meeting. It was also, within that month, we found that there were no families who responded saying that they wanted to get more deeply involved besides the ones who already were. And so understanding that, the need from the families was not such that they were looking to get more deeply involved with us, and that the enthusiasm on the leadership banking committee, which I think really, defined our group, was dwindling. I ultimately stepped down internally, let the folks know on the banking committee and know in October that I was going to step down at the end of the year and step back from the group. We did our final delivery and let folks know, just to confirm, that this will be the last delivery that you get. And we received, a tidal wave of thank you so much. Thank you for everything you've done for our family. So I know that work was really appreciated. And then I then let everybody know, not just the banking folks know, in October that I was going to step down by the end of the year. And we shut down the bank account and all the donation platforms in October, and the remaining money, it was $1,600 and some change that we still had in the bank accounts, went to one of our banking committee members who is deeply involved with her local church and also with a local school, and who does mutual aid work, copious amounts of mutual aid work for her community just on her own. So we were happy to give that remaining money to her so that she could continue that work and funnel it through her church and her school. Just to give you some context as to where we were as far as COVID at this point, we had gone from, I think about a year ago, being 50% fully vaccinated to being 61% fully vaccinated, and pretty much holding steady there. And you can see this was October of 2022. So we were here at just about 35,000 deaths from COVID. By December 31st, we had cleaned out the packing area. All of the remaining shelving went to our partner pantries. So all of the clothes racks and the shelves went to those groups so they can continue another life there at those pantries. And we publicly announced the group closure at this point. I had announced that I was stepping down for 3 months, and there was nobody looking to step in and lead this version of Mutual Aid Peoria forward. So we publicly announced the group closure on January 17th of 2023. And so here you can see the phase 3 totals. On the delivery side, we did 3 rounds of deliveries for each of the 40 families. The incoming donations were much lower than before. Individual donations is here, but it's so low you can barely see it on this graph. And the Patreon you can see in orange, and you would expect to see it as a regular heartbeat of monthly deposits coming in, but there's this big gap and then a spike, and that is due to the changes that came into place due to Biden's COVID-19 Recovery Act, which had been passed a couple of years prior. And one of the things that act did was lower the amount of money that a person can receive via Venmo or Patreon or any of those platforms without having to report it on their taxes. And so we were basically realizing that now we were going to have somebody was going to have to claim tax accountability for incoming donations. It came into place in 2022, and luckily we didn't have very many donations coming in, so I don't think it's going to be a very big factor, but it was another thing that we would have needed to think through if we continued. I know that there are options available. I think many, if not most, similar organizations had found some kind of fiscal sponsor role, and there's actually groups out there that can act as a fiscal sponsor and bookkeeping service for you if you pay them. So there are options that were out there, but coming to that decision, with the lowered enthusiasm within the decision-making committees. I think this was just another big sign that this was the end, but there was a pause while we were doing some research. There's actually a really great mutual aid legal guide out there, which is linked to on the resources page of our website. We were actually in contact with the person who wrote that. He was very helpful, and ultimately, about halfway through the year, filled out the necessary forms to be able to keep the money flowing from the Patreon. And so we got all of those donations that had been storing up. And then after that, it was a monthly deposit. And here you can see our phase 3 outgoing purchases. You can see that the majority of the purchases were done from donated funds. So those are coming from our Patreon. And it's worth noting at this point that the majority of our Patreon subscribers were actually people who did not live in Peoria. There are people who probably grew up in Peoria who I knew and who now lived elsewhere, or people that I met in college or through work. And so that was a major change, because in the previous 2 phases, we've been funded pretty much entirely from people within Peoria. So digging a little deeper into this now, you can see, you can see crystal clear evidence that I am terrible at setting boundaries, because I said that I was not going to use any more of my personal funds, and yet I did use 4127 on rapid response items. And then I also, of course, had to continue to pay for the Patreon. So that's 175 there for ops. And then looking on the donations pool, we spent $1,951.41 on the food hygiene household cleaning supply distribution, $430 on hotels. There was $52.66 in rapid response that I did correctly start using donation funds for. And then we had the final payout, that final money that was in the account that went to one of our banking committee members who'd been with us since the beginning. And she received $1,628.16 to continue doing mutual aid work through her church and the school she worked for. So looking at donation totals, we received $2,527.07. We also had $1,493.22 from the last phase, which equals our outgoing money of $4,061.96. And during this phase, we had 12 total volunteers. 10 of those were existing volunteers with 2 new volunteers. We made 120 deliveries. We did not fund any hotel nights. We held 3 meetings and we held 5 events. And now the grand totals. So here you can see the overall food hygiene household cleaning supply distro timeline on the top, and the overall incoming donations on the bottom, which does include the Peoria People's Project disbursements here at the beginning. You can see how once we start getting into phase 2 after the conflict, and then moving into our other more systematic processes, we also had a big dip in incoming donations. And I think that that there's really, I mean, it's difficult to say exactly what caused it. We also were at that point, no longer under a Trump presidency, and the state had reopened. So I think a lot of the enthusiasm for mutual aid also had dissipated, but also there was conflict within the group. And I talk more about what I think might have caused this in the Reflections webinar, which is the 3rd part in this series. And here you can see the outgoing purchases by type at the bottom, with the light tan here on the left being Peoria People's Project, the black being donation money, and then the orange being my personal funds. So you can see I definitely, covered at the beginning trying to get this going, and then we had donations covering it for quite a while, but especially as we got towards the end, I was covering more and more of it. And then when I stopped supporting it financially, we were, only able to do so few, much fewer donations. Looking at our all-time donations in, we had $31,220.45. The vast majority of that came from individual donations. And then next 13% of it came from the Patreon. Our biggest fundraiser was the Quality Tattoo Company, followed by the holiday fundraiser. And then one individual who gave their GameStop money to us, 2 individuals who gave us their COVID stimulus are the next highest ranking fundraisers. And then we move on to the others. And then looking at all of the all-time money spent, all of the money that went out, we directed $55,405.98 to marginalized people. 65% of that went to the food hygiene household cleaning supply distribution program. 21% went to hotels for unhoused friends during severe weather. 6% of that was spent on rapid response, just meeting people's needs in the moment. 6% of that was on transport, gas, U-Haul trucks, etc. And 2% was on operations, with everything else being accounting for less than 1% of our total money spent. We had a grand total of 55 volunteers. We made 1,778 deliveries of care packages. We paid for 69 instances of a person in a hotel when they would not have otherwise had shelter. We held 20 meetings and we supported 20 events. And here just showing that more detailed information of how much of the money overall came from, about 50% of it overall from donations, very significant portion from my personal funding, and then estimated money from other volunteers and from Peoria People's Project. And you can see the grand totals for all of the different categories of what we spent money on. And so here's just another way to look at this too, thinking not just about, what the money was spent on, but where the money ultimately ended up. So we had received $31,220.45 in donations from people, which then went to the banking committee, to the marginalized people, to the people from our community who decided how to best meet their needs with it, as well as $24,185.53, which was money spent, just individually by myself or by other volunteers in the moment. But the result was 30% of all of our money spent went to Walmart, 15% went to Baymont, which is one of the local hotel options here, 16% to Sam's Club, 12% to Costco, then Oyo, which is another local hotel, Motel 6, Aldi. And so you can see here, really what we were doing was collecting money from individuals, small amounts from a very large number of individuals, from mainly from people in Peoria, but also people outside of Peoria, putting, a significant portion of it that was donated to the group as a whole went to a banking committee to be decided upon. And then it ultimately went, largely to fairly big corporations where we could get the most amount of items for the cheapest amount possible. And, I don't think any of us on the banking committee really wanted to be giving this much money to the Walmarts and the Costcos and the chain hotels of the city. But ultimately, we decided we wanted to be able to get the most possible for the smallest amount possible. And so this was the way that we decided to spend the money. So this is an important slide, and it's a slide that I go into more depth and more explanation of in the reflection survey, but I think it's also relevant here. As we think about impact and what is impact, all of the stats that I've given are one way of quantifying impact. I think this comes at impact from another angle, or opens the door to start looking at impact differently. These represent the number of people who came to the organization from different perspectives. Of course, with a mutual aid organization, it's actually, especially while you're doing the work, you don't want to be looking at as people who are volunteers versus people who are recipients. You want to be a flat organization where everybody is both giving and taking in equal measure, in a self-sustaining way. But I don't know that our organization really ever achieved that, and it is helpful to look at these ratios, I think. So we had a grand total of 558 people who we helped. That's includes those 168 families. We knew the total number of people in each family, so we can figure out with all of the children and the elderly and the full number of people in the family, as well as all the people that we helped through the hotels. It was 558 people. And of those who gave help, we had 344 people who gave money, 55 who gave time. And then there was a small group of 17 people who started off as recipients, and then moved into volunteer roles, and some of them into decision-making roles on our banking committee, on our highest committee. And there were 17 people total who did that. And so, I hope that there can be an impact created just by the bringing together of these people, and these special 17 people who have seen both sides of the organization. That's an opportunity for friendships to be created, and for for us to build and diversify our pool of activists in the area. And I think just overall that, each of these people that was touched with the possibility that an organization like this could exist and that there could be people who are reaching out to help and to support each other can have a ripple effect and can have unseen consequences. And one very important story that I can share was a woman who was a volunteer with us for quite a while, one of the 17 people who started as a recipient and then became a volunteer, was a chronically homeless woman who seemed to follow a pattern where she would go from one abuser that she could live with to another. Things usually would start off good. It would be, like a savior role. And then, within a matter of time, abuse would start and worsen. And then she'd be out on the street again and need help getting to a different place that she could stay. And one day she was helping packing and came back into my office, and she was in the office calling the Center for Prevention of Abuse, because this time that, when she was volunteering with us to pack was one of the only times that she could get away from. This was one of her most violent and toxic abusers. And so she was able to use that time to get her head together and be able to use the phone freely to be able to make that call. And she was able to get out and get some help for a period of time from the Center for Prevention of Abuse. I think that was in 2021 when that happened. And so, she was back with him on and off over the course of a year after that. And the abuse got pretty bad to the point that eventually she could not take it anymore. And she called the police, and the police came, and that person is in jail for quite a while now. Can definitely say that, because she stood up to him, if he ever does get out of jail, he won't be at an age where he's able to hurt women anymore. So she made an incredible impact. And I think having a space to come to get away from those vicious cycles, even that little thing in that little hour where she was able to make that call to get to the Center for Prevention of Abuse for that first time, I think that shows that there were more broad impacts and impacts that happened that we didn't all see, and are impacts that any of us can be making by doing mutual aid work. So that's the end of my presentation. I just want to thank everybody that was involved in the organization in any way. And I want to be sure to say that I'm not doing this presentation, to get a pat on the back. I mean, if you want to pat me on the back, you can give me a pat on the back. The real reason to do this is that, I want to sort of show what we did and how we did it, with hopes that somebody will take this and then do things better than we did. Transfer even more money into the hands of marginalized people. Be even more inclusive of bringing those marginalized people's perspectives into your organization, or better yet, find an existing group led by marginalized people and just get behind them. If you are running your own group, be even more transparent than we were with your funding. Communicate stats out in real time to people. Show people, at where every cent is going. Be more careful with each other for sure. Make more time for self-care. Do more education for the community. That's one of the biggest regrets that I have. And just be more intentional in what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think that, going forward, a lot of the perils of society that we see now are going to get worse and worse, and it's going to be up to us to take care of each other, and we need to start building those skills now. So, and if you'd like to learn more about some of how we work together and what I think we needed to have been able to work together better, please check out the next webinar in this series, which is our Reflections webinar. Phase 2.